On Christmas Day 2024, a tanker moved slowly across the Baltic Sea with its anchor down. It dragged that anchor along the seabed for nearly 90 kilometers. Behind it, one by one, the lines that carry power and data between countries went dark. Within weeks, there were more. A ship in the Baltic accused of cutting 2 cables in a day and a half. 3 cables severed in the Red Sea. Headlines about spy ships, shadow fleets, a war being fought in secret on the floor of the ocean. Everyone agreed someone was cutting the world's cables. And then, almost a year later, a court finally got its hands on one of those ships. It did not convict anyone. It said something far stranger. And to understand what it said, you have to understand what these cables actually are. Right now, you think of the internet as a cloud. You send a message up, it comes down somewhere else. And nothing in between seems to touch the physical world at all. But there is no cloud. There is a cable. More than 95% of all the data that crosses between continents does not travel by satellite or through the air. It travels through glass fibers thinner than a human hair, bundled inside a tube, lying on the bottom of the sea. Somewhere between 1.5 and 1.8 million kilometers of it. On the order of 600 cables, wrapping the planet several times over. And here is the part that should stop you. In the deep ocean, that cable is not buried. It is not armored. It is not guarded. In shallow water near the coast, where fishing boats drag their nets, the cable is wrapped in steel and plowed into the seabed. But out in the abyss, kilometers down, it is a bare tube about the width of a garden hose, laid directly on the mud and simply left there. The most important machine your civilization has ever built runs along the bottom of the ocean, exposed in the dark, with nothing on top of it and no one standing over it. Peel that tube open and the strangeness only grows. On the outside, where it needs it, there is steel wire armor. Under that, layers of tough plastic and a copper conductor to carry power, and a sheath to hold back the sea. And then, at the very center of all of it, the thing the entire structure exists to protect. A few strands of glass, each about the width of a single human hair, carrying the light that is every call, every message, every transaction between continents. Almost the whole cable is there to defend almost nothing. And in the deep, even that defense is stripped away. Because down there, the only thing that was ever going to hurt it, a fishing boat, cannot reach. So when the cables started breaking, the story wrote itself. It had to be sabotage. Look at the incidents and you can see why. On the 25th of December, the Cook Islands flagged. Russia-linked tanker Eagle S allegedly dragged its anchor across the Baltic floor, damaging a power link between Finland and Estonia and the telecom cables beside it. That link stayed broken for more than 7 months. The repair bill was reported at up to 60 million euros. A month earlier, a Chinese-flagged bulk carrier had dragged its anchor roughly 180 nautical miles over about a day and a half. And 2 cables were cut in that time. In the Red Sea, 3 more went down. 4 headline incidents in barely over a year, each one pointing, the coverage said, to something deliberate. But every one of those stories is weaker than the headline it produced. In the Red Sea, the leading theory is not an attack on the cables at all. A cargo ship had been hit by missiles days before, its crew dropped anchor and abandoned it. And the drifting hulk dragged that anchor through the cables on its own. An accident downstream of a war, not a strike on the internet. The country accused of it denied involvement. The Chinese-flagged ship in the Baltic was investigated by Sweden's accident authority, which reported that it could not link the incident to any intentional action, and noted that it had been allowed aboard more than a month later and denied access to the ship's electronic data. In other words, no evidence found was partly a statement about what they were allowed to see. There is one case that goes further than the others. A year before all of this, in October 2023, Finnish investigators concluded that a Chinese container ship had severed a gas pipeline and a cable in the Baltic by dragging its anchor along the bottom. That is the closest anyone has come to a firm finding, a named vessel and anchor, a conclusion on what caused the damage. And even there, the careful distinction holds. To find that an anchor caused a cut is not to find that anyone meant to cut it. Causation is not intent, and the proceedings are still unfinished in a courtroom on the other side of the world. Investigators use these narrow words for a reason. A ship was accused. An anchor was found to have caused the damage. A case was opened. Almost never does anyone say and prove that a cut was on purpose. And that brings us back to the court. In October 2025, the Helsinki District Court ruled on the Eagle S. It did not decide whether the ship was guilty. It decided that it could not decide at all. Under the international law of the sea, the damage happened outside Finland's territorial waters, in a place where jurisdiction belongs to the ship's flag state or to the home countries of its crew, but not to Finland. The court classified a 90-kilometer gouge across the seabed as a navigational incident, dismissed the criminal case, and ordered the Finnish state to pay the defendants legal fees, around 195,000 euros. Read that again. The cable was cut. The ship was found. And the answer from the law was, this is not our sea. That is the real vulnerability, and it is not the one anyone expected. The cables are not especially fragile, and they are not mostly being attacked. The problem is that the floor of the ocean is the largest place on Earth where almost nothing is anyone's legal responsibility. A 7-month blackout, a 60 million euro bill, and the state that lost the cable pays for the defense. Now, if you still believe there is a secret campaign out there, consider who disagrees. The International Cable Protection Committee is the body that represents the industry. If anyone had a reason to talk up the threat of sabotage, to justify budgets and warships and attention, it would be them. And their published position is the opposite. Between 150 and 200 cable faults happen every year. Around 70 to 80% of them are caused by ordinary human accident, commercial fishing, and ships' anchors. On deliberate damage. They say plainly that there have been no verified incidents of state-sponsored sabotage since the Second World War, and that intentional damage is less than 1% of all cable faults, year after year. Less than 1%. The most authoritative body in the field is telling you that the shadow war you have been reading about is, in the numbers, almost entirely fishing boats. Not a fleet of saboteurs, but a fleet of trawlers going about an ordinary day, snagging the nervous system of the modern world by accident, over and over, because no one buried it out there and no one is watching. The depth of the water decides what kills the cable. Shallower than about 200 meters where the trawlers work, it is nets and anchors. Deeper than 1,000 meters, it is nature, seabed landslides, abrasion, the slow movements of the earth. Which means the armor, the steel, the burial, all of it goes where the fishermen are. The cable is protected against the people who never meant it any harm. It is not protected against the sea, and it is not protected against a lawyer because out there isn't one. So the world's cables break constantly, mostly by accident. And here is the second thing nobody expects. When one breaks, the hard part is almost never the repair. On the 15th of January, 2022, a volcano erupted near Tonga and tore out the island nation's connection to the world. For weeks, a nation of roughly 100,000 people could barely call out at all. Banks, flights, and families scattered across the globe, cut off from the planet by a single broken thread on the floor of the sea, waiting for a ship. The international cable that linked Tonga to Fiji was fixed in about a month. But Tonga's domestic cable, the one connecting its own islands to each other, did not come back into service until the night of the 12th of July, 2023. 18 months. And when you break those 18 months down, the shape of the whole system appears. Roughly 5 months went just to confirm exactly how much cable and what kind to order. 7 months for the factory in France to manufacture it. 4 months to ship it around the world. 2 months for the repair vessel to reach Tonga. And the repair itself, the actual fixing of the connection, took 8 days with a crew of 57. Almost none of the delay was technical. It was a supply chain, a queue, and a very long journey by boat. Because that is how a break is found and fixed. And the method is stranger and older than you would ever guess. Stations at both ends of the cable send an electrical pulse down. The line in time how long it takes to reflect off the damage, triangulating the break to a single point on a map of empty water. Then a ship sails to that point and lowers a grapnel and iron hook off its stern, and drags it along the bottom of the ocean until it snags the cable. It hauls the cable up, cuts it, recovers each end, splices in a new length and lays it back down. The fix for the machine that carries almost all of human communication is a boat dragging a hook along the seabed until it catches something. That technique is older than the fiber by more than 100 years. Because none of this is new. In August of 1858, the first cable ever laid across the Atlantic carried a message from Queen Victoria to the American president. It was 98 words long, and it took about 16 hours to send. 10 minutes a word. The man in charge of the eastern end, an engineer named Wildman Whitehouse, grew impatient with how slow it was, and forced up to 2,000 volts through the line to push the signal faster. He burned out the insulation and destroyed the cable. It had worked for a matter of weeks and carried 732 messages before it died, and he was blamed for the failure and dismissed. It took another 8 years and 3 more attempts before a cable laid by the largest ship in the world, at the time held for good. In 1866, running 80 times faster than the first. The whole enterprise from the very beginning has been improvised, overstrained, and quietly saved by people you will never hear of. And it still is. The line under the sea is not a passive wire. Every 70 to 100 kilometers, an amplifier boosts the light so it can keep traveling. And those amplifiers are powered by up to 15,000 volts of direct current sent down a conductor inside the cable itself, from stations on the shore returning through the ocean. A thread of glass and a river of electricity run along the bottom of the sea, holding the world together. And almost no one on the surface knows that it is there. And where all of that finally comes ashore, there is no fortress waiting. The cable that carries a continent's traffic climbs out of the surf, crosses a quiet beach, and ends in a low building that looks like nothing at all. A room of racks and blinking lights behind an ordinary door. The whole system is like that end to end, colossal in importance, humble in appearance, and almost entirely unguarded. So the next time you send a message to the cloud, remember where it really goes. Down a hair of glass, inside a hose lying bare on the floor of the ocean. Past the amplifiers and the old splices, and the places where a trawler once snagged it. Across a seabed that belongs to no one and is guarded by no one. In a stretch of dark where the most important machine on Earth is cut about 200 times a year. And where, when it happens, the law looks at the wreckage and says, "This is not our sea." Not a cloud. Never a cloud. A hose in the dark and a boat with a hook and a hope that it holds.